Thank you very much, everybody. We are here representatives. From AILAC, the African Union, the African Group, Barbados, least developed countries, and the islands. And we want to read a joint statement where we actually are calling developed countries and the whole COP and the parties that we can sit to negotiate a pragmatic approach where actually we can have a provision and we can bridge the finance gap with different type of strategies that we could negotiate and that we could have a roadmap from Baku to Belém de Pará in Brazil that is proactive to actually have the public finance that we need to address this crisis. So I'll give the floor to the Minister of Barbados.
Thank you so much. This statement that I will read from the coalition that is here is really saying that time is running out. And we know that the funds are there. We know that the funds are there, and it is important that the funds be delivered, particularly for countries like ours that urgently need the finance. Just hours before the conclusion of COP29 on climate change, more than 80 countries vulnerable to climate change and that urgently need the finance are calling for an additional effort to provide and mobilize $1.3 trillion US per year, moving beyond the $100 billion agreed upon in 2009. A clear mandate is demanded to comprehensively transform the global financial system and apply measures to bridge the finance gap and meet the urgent needs of developing countries suffering the worst effects of climate change. After a week and a half of intense negotiations, the Independent Association of Latin America and the Caribbean, AILAC, the African Group of Negotiators, the Alliance of Small and Developing States, Least Developed Countries Group, proposed a path to the presidency of COP29 to definitively resolve discussions regarding the new collective quantified goal on finance to achieve the USD 1.3 trillion needed to enable developing countries to undertake climate action and face its adverse effects. The proposal presented by more than 80 countries vulnerable to climate change is based on making an additional effort to increase from the insufficient $100 billion agreed upon in 2009 to the $1.3 trillion per year funds that will cover the needs in the regions and develop necessary actions to counteract and adapt to the effects of climate change and address loss and damage, which have exacerbated its impact and the number of affected people on the planet. The call from the countries, this is our call. For their part, developing countries demand greater political will, reiterating that the new goal should be achieved, delivered through grants and highly concessional finance to avoid worsening the debt crisis. Regarding resources, we emphasize that they must be additional, accessible, affordable, predictable, sustainable, transformative, and tangible, considering the high cost of capital, limited fiscal space, and unsustainable debt, which we cannot afford. We cannot afford empty promises. It is necessary and possible to provide and mobilize real financing to developing countries. This would enable achieving the 1.3 trillion per year target. There are innovative strategies to be able to breach the finance gap, including fiscal measures by developed countries, such as redirecting fossil fuel subsidies of developed countries to raise new public resources, and also reorienting current existing public spending to meet the 1 trillion US per year needed. We jointly request to work together on a roadmap to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will open up for some questions, or any of my colleagues would like to add something. So we will open up for questions. Yes? I guess so, yes. There's a microphone coming.
Thais Lara from Climatica, you mentioned a figure that I think it's going to be like the most ambitious, but considering how the negotiations are so far, what do you consider the lowest number that will be fair to have in the NCQG?
Look, this is the problem we have right now in this negotiation. We cannot talk about a lower or higher number because there's no number. So basically what we're saying is that if they put a number from the provision, what we are saying is that we have the political will to sit, to create the bridging of the gap so that we can get to the trillion. And we can work with them so that also they can create further public finance for climate from their countries. But what we need is political will. We are saying here, more than 80 countries, we have the political will. And we have some innovative possibilities that our countries have been working on. Each one of these countries can talk about the initiatives that the presidents and prime ministers have worked on. There is political will. And we can have a roadmap to Brazil where we can put is more the question, how can we raise that public money to bridge the gap? And we have some strategies, and we can negotiate. But it's less than 48 hours before this finish, and we don't have anything concrete to negotiate on or build on. This is the problem.
Okay.
Yes, please.
And I also want to add, when we talk about what's the lowest figure, we have to recognize that the 1.3 trillion is already low, it's already insufficient. So asking us then to then say what we can accept then doesn't recognize really and truly the depth of the financing gap that is needed. So our call primarily is to meet the 1.3 trillion. Right? That's the call. That's what needs to be delivered. We are willing to work on a roadmap that allows us to get there. We have been very upfront in terms of our needs. We have been very upfront, some of us, in terms of what we see as our quantum and what it should look like. We just need developed countries to meet us at the table, again, so that we can work towards the roadmap. But again, 1.3 is already the lowest denominator for us in terms of our adaptation, and also as well to meet what we need to build resilience.
I just want to jump on that. As the representative from Barbados has mentioned, 1.3 is already very low for us, because that doesn't even take us to 1.5. That's taken us to 2.7. So we do understand that even if we get the entire 1.3 that we're demanding, we will still have to do a lot of work. We will still have to do a lot of mobilization within our own countries to be able to adapt and to cover for the loss and damages that the developed countries have imposed on them. So this question regarding, what's the lowest you can go? I mean, come on. That's like asking how many dead people are you willing to have in your country due to this crisis. So what we need is 1.3. We have been demanding it for so long, and we need the developed countries to speak and say something, because right now they are more quiet than night. Thank you.
I know there's other questions, but we have to be assured also that we can't just be thinking on the low number, and especially the 1.3 trillion. We know that it's already there, but there's no word in the text also talking about additional. We have to be talking about additional money that should be being mobilizing. So this is something that we are going to be pushing, that it has to be additional money.
If I can add on the figure, Africa has been upfront on these figures. 1.3 is the amount that we say needs to be mobilized, but we have also given a figure for provisioning, and we said that should be at least 600 This is in light of this spending that Africa is already spending 5 to 9% of our GDP every year on responding to the challenges that we face on climate change. So we are spending that much already of our own money. And so what we are asking for is additional financing and affordable financing, because the cost of financing is one of the biggest challenges that we all face as developing countries seated here. Thank you.
So very briefly, last 2 questions, because we have to get out of here at 5 o'clock. So 1, 2, sorry. So if you can, maybe, if you're very short, we can allow for the 4. Just questions, very short, maybe you can allow for the 4.
Hi, Akshat Rati with Bloomberg News. One question that we've heard a lot in the plenary is from developed countries, there is a demand for having mitigation. So language from COP28 around tripling renewables, doubling energy efficiency, and transitioning away from fossil fuels attached alongside the finance goal. And we heard from the AILAC Group that that is something they have a red line on. So there seem to be on mitigation really serious red lines, which might make it difficult for you to get a finance goal. So how are you as a group going to deal with that challenge between developed countries and the AILAC Group?
Okay, next.
Hi, Josh Gabatis from Carbon Brief. Talking about these sort of innovative forms of finance, you've referred to a provision goal of 600 billion. I think AOS have pushed for something even larger, about 900 billion. Would these innovative sources of finance allow for less pressure on developed countries to provide grants, like less grant-based finance overall? Thank you.
Thank you. There was this lady here and somebody there, and we will finalize. I know that we have 5 minutes, so 1, 2, and we will just answer very quickly.
Hi, Sarah Schoenhart from Politico as E&E News. Just wondered if you put this roadmap proposal to the developed countries and how they've responded.
Okay, and finally, there was somebody there? No? Those 3. Okay, so anybody wants to answer? We answer 1, 2, 3 like this. Okay, so I'll start to break the ice. No, we are putting this proposal publicly here. We have talked to them during the whole of yesterday, but they keep going in circles in their geopolitical games. So this is the first thing. And second, for us, is very clear. There is a provision part of the goal, and then there is a gap we need to bridge by mobilizing resources. So this provision should be the leverage to be able to close the gap. That will be the principle. Anybody else? Ali, and then friend from Panama.
On the mitigation risk question, you will have had me speaking for Africa saying we are actually the most ambitious. We need to be ambitious. Mitigation is in our interest, definitely. But we must also talk about implementation of mitigation actions. We must talk about support for mitigation actions. And we must talk about adaptation and resilience development. This is the challenge that we are facing. And unless we talk about adaptation gap that is currently not being spoken about properly, then we will not be able to talk about mitigation. So we must talk about mitigation. I keep on emphasizing that for investment in Africa, last year, it went down by 47% for renewable energy, a continent that needs the most energy in the world. 600 million Africans don't have access to energy. We have the best resources on energy, whether you talk of solar, wind, geothermal, yet investment is going down. So what are we talking about mitigation? Mitigation, yes, but mitigation without resources can never happen, and that is what we continue emphasizing. Thank you.
Panama?
So look,
Some Panama, we close.
Thank you. I think that it's very clear after what was just said that adaptation is our priority for all developing countries. But it's very important also to have this clear. Honduras coming from a country with forests, and most of our countries also have forests. We can't leave that mitigation is only renewable energy. Mitigation is also our forest. So we need to emphasize also on how we're going to act on mitigation, taking into account our forests and all what the carbon sinks that these help out in our forests. So let's not just think and let's not just be thrown into talking about renewable energy. Forest is also a priority for us.
Very good,
Folks,
Panama.
So, as the Minister from Honduras is mentioning, our countries almost all have vast forests, and the services that these forests have been offering to the rest of the world, cleaning up the atmosphere, have not been paid for. So if you want to talk about mitigation, let's talk about mitigation, but pay us for that mitigation, because as of right now, everybody has been free riding on the forests of Latin America, of Africa, and the rest of the developing world. Let's go back again to the 1.3 goal. The global economic output of the world is 100 trillion. All we're asking for is just 1%. 1% of the world's GDP. Is that really too much to ask to save life? No, it's definitely not. So it is time to engage. We're waiting on developed countries to engage, because as of right now, they have done nothing.
Thank you. So time is running out and the funds are there, 1.3 trillion. Let's build a roadmap from Baku to Brazil. Thank you.